going to show you how to prepare your sample for sending it into the lab. So in any type of sample, whether it was the raised beds or the garden or the fields or the pasture, we collected several smaller samples called subsamples. In order to get a representative sample of the entire area that we're trying to test, we have to aggregate all of those subsamples that we took. So we told you to put the soil into the bucket, and now we're going to show you what you do with all of that soil that you put in the bucket. So I've got my bucket of kind of those subsamples or the multiple samples, but from the same area that we're testing. In this bucket, there's between 10 and 20 or even 30 subsamples, depending on how big of an area we're testing originally. So what I'm going to do is aggregate these samples to try to get one representative sample for the entire area. We do this through a process of homogenization. Basically, we're just mixing everything together. So gloves are good for this step, or if you don't mind the dirt, you can just use your hands. We're going to mix this up as well as we can. Now in southwestern New York, where we have a lot of clay fields, you'll find these really big clumps of soil. It's super important to make sure you're breaking those up so that you get a really good mixture in your sample. If you come across any sod clumps, you can get rid of those. If you find any worms, you can return them back to their home. And we're just going to keep mixing. We're going to mix this as well as we can. And usually it takes a couple of minutes. And again, any of these clumps that we find, we're going to make sure we're breaking those up. So once we've got the sample all mixed together, we're going to spread it out on either a piece of newspaper or a paper towel in a place where it can dry. Obviously not outside in the mist where we are today. And we're going to try to dry the sample down a little bit. The reason for drying it out is that it helps to preserve the soil, and it also saves on shipping costs. So what I normally do is when it's a sunny day, I'll just use kind of the outdoor picnic table, put a layer of paper towels or newspaper or paper bags down, and spread this soil out in an even layer. You don't have to use all of it because we mix this together really well. I probably use a little bit more than I need to, especially when the soil's wet, because then once this dries down, I'll mix it together even more. So once I've got this kind of spread out, I'll again make sure that any of these big clumps are broken up, and I'll leave it to sit overnight or for a couple of hours so that it dries down. Now, if we pretended that this was already dry, what I would do is kind of put this all back together. Give it a good mix one more time. And then from this homogenized or aggregated mixture, we only need between 1 and 2 cups. So that's why it's really important to make sure you're getting a lot of subsamples that are representative of the entire area, and that you're mixing it together really, really well. So I would take these 1 to 2 cups, put them into a sandwich bag and clearly label it, and then that's what we're going to send into the lab.